And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection. I'm your host, Robert Pictou. Long before the Confederation in 1867, firearms were considered to be necessary items for hunting and protection throughout the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries. On today's Open Connection, we open our archives to bring you this story from 1989.
Meet Peter Appleby, gunmaker. In fact, he's a gunsmith who hails originally from Britain and is a member of the American Custom Gunmakers Guild. Both the words gunsmith and guild seem to me to be of an era past, but it's just not so. The Appleby Gunsmithing Company is in Telkwa. Peter Appleby, as proprietor, comes with nearly a quarter century of experience in his trade. He says the job is multifaceted.
Well, the gunsmith is a machinist, a metal worker, a blacksmith, a cabinet maker, a psychologist, a ballistician, a tailor. He has to understand the requirements for the calibers for the game. That's just a thorough understanding of people and guns.
So should you then, as a gunsmith, be able to take all the raw materials, I mean, starting from blocks of steel and blocks of wood, and produce a gun for someone?
Yes, across here a gunsmith is thought of as a gun mechanic, as we call a mechanic, but a gunsmith should be able to take raw materials and produce an entire gun.
Appleby says it's not common anymore to start from scratch. It's expensive and not really necessary.
In the average run of the mill custom gunsmithing, we usually use a selection of actions that are satisfactory from a gunsmith's engineering point of view. Then we highly modify them, barrel them up, stock them up to the customer's requirements.
Before he became a gunsmith, Appleby was interested in guns and shooting. He was 3 times Northeast pistol champion in Britain.
Well, I started in the trade when I was an engineering student, and I was interested in target shooting, couldn't find a gun I wanted. And the gunsmith I was bugging to modify my target rifles eventually one day threw an apron at me and said, well, you know where the lathe is, do it yourself. And that started a 7-year association.
So what does it mean to become a gunsmith, to you at least, at the time that you did it?
Well, it's slightly different in Europe. You're a professional guild artisan. It's a trade. It's very much like a car mechanic, or it's a doctor or whatever else. It's a profession.
A guild artisan, the guilds, in place from the Dark Ages onwards. Appleby describes them as the original trade union.
Yeah, well, guilds were originally set up as a body to protect their members from exploitation, to set standards for their work, and make sure that the guys were paid for their work so that they weren't exploited. And also, a guild was an apprenticeship program. When you joined a guild, you indentured to a guild, and at the end of your indentureship to the guild, you were a journeyman, and after a certain number of years as a journeyman, you became a tradesman.
The guilds still exist today, still regulating their trade and disseminating information to the guildsmen.
They're still around. There is the London Gunmakers Guild, Birmingham Gunmakers Guild back in Britain, and there is the American Custom Gunmakers Guild.
Of which you're a member?
Yeah, there's about 200 members in North America.
What's the function of a guild?
Same as in Britain, it regulates their membership. It sets certain standards of performance. It's an arbitrary body. It will settle a dispute between a gun maker and a client. It's also there to inform the gun makers of new techniques, new materials, new processes, rediscovered old processes. This is, gunsmithing is a very solitary occupation. You tend not to talk to too many other gunsmiths, and it's very nice to be able to talk to 200 gunsmiths every month by newsletter.
As far as not being able to talk to other gunsmiths goes, Appleby is the only professional gunmaker in the northern half of the province, certainly reducing the opportunity for shop talk over coffee. But what about guns themselves? As I thought guilds were of days gone by, I was surprised by how long guns have been around.
Well, the first recorded formula for gunpowder was written by a Franciscan friar, and he lived from 1214 to 1292. So sometime between 1292, gunpowder was invented.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Thank you for staying with us. Known as a matchlock musket, it was considered the first self-contained small arm. The matchlock musket came to Canada when Sir Humphrey Gilbert arrived in Newfoundland in 1583. Let us return to archives as Peter shares more about firearm history.
Firearms were certainly invented before 1326 because the city of Florence ordered a rather large quantity of barrels and steel bullets for the protection of the city. So sometime between 1326, firearms were certainly invented. The thing that finished off knights was guns. The guys on the horseback carrying the lances and their swords were able to be defeated by a bunch of peasants, poorly trained peasants, with the harquebus, which was a very early firearm that you sort of hung onto a pole, and it was actually a handheld cannon that you set fire to with a match, with a long, slow-burning taper. And hopefully it killed the guy in front of him rather than killing you. But James II the first firearms fatality that's recorded was James II in 1430-something. And he actually had his gun explode and kill him. So they've been around a long time.
In today's world, Appleby says he noticed some differences in customer demands when he came to Canada from Britain.
Yeah, North Americans tend to be tied up on accuracy and to the detriment of reliability. And I was always taught that first you have reliability, then you have accuracy, then if there's any money left, you make it pretty. If it doesn't go bang every time, it's not a rifle, it's an ornament. Accuracy is important, but not as important as reliability. It may be adequate on a moose. Very few people, I guess, are charged by a moose, but if you just stuck a bullet in the wrong place in an African and Cape buffalo, he's coming across to discuss the matter with you at about 40 miles an hour, you want to make sure the gun goes off the second time. The professionals use basically a Mauser action or a Mauser derivative. It was designed over about 30 years by Paul Mauser in the end of the last century. And it culminated in the 1898 model of Mauser. And that was designed to be handed to a 17-year-old recruit who had had 6 weeks basic training, was going to be put in a trench and shot at. So they idiot-proofed the gun as far as possible. That idiot-proofing, that's a 98 action there. The idiot-proofing means that it's also very, very reliable when it comes to hunting dangerous game. Similar to the 98.
Appleby takes that Mauser action and modifies it to be more suitable for the sportsman, but its basic simplicity and reliability ensures it fires in a pinch. For example, for the guide outfitter whose nervous client makes a mistake, or just the average guy out after his first big game animal. But the original Army issue isn't quite ready to be fitted on a hunting rifle, and that is where the gunsmith comes in.
It's every advantage that it's got doubly applies in hunting. And this is, the safety on these is designed to block the sights when it's on vertical, so that the 17-year-old will realize he's still got his safety on if he's looking at his safety. With a scope sight mounted on here, the safety doesn't work. It hits the back of the scope. So you put a side-mounted safety on it. Likewise, the bolt handle, when it's open, would hit the scope. So the bolt handle has to be cut off and reshaped and bent down.
So aside from modifications as well, you've made it very pretty. I mean, this is a pretty piece of work here from the stock all the way through. So.
Yeah, that's a classic English stalking rifle. It's minimum amount of wood, just enough wood to provide the strength for the caliber. It's the sort of thing that you would take for hunting deer in Britain.
What's this gun worth?
$1,800. The carving is traditional, last century, actually, turn of the century. The checkering is required for grip when your hands are wet, muddy, but it also doesn't need to be ugly. It can be pretty as well. The tips on the wood were originally put there for protection of the end grain from rain and stop the wood swelling and stop the elements getting at the wood, but they turned out to be a cosmetic feature. But more like most cosmetic features on guns, they serve a purpose. There are very few unnecessary parts on a gun.
The finished wood on Appleby's gun is beautiful, obviously work done by hand, compared to a gun off the shelf.
This is a very well thought of current factory model. This is the finish on this is polished oil. It's equivalent to a French polish. This one is baked on epoxy. The advantage of baked on epoxy is it's waterproof initially. However, when you get a scratch in it and the moisture gets through it, you have to remove the entire finish. This, you just touch it up in the spot that it got the scratch. It also hides the wood. The grain doesn't show through. It makes a decent piece of wood look like a piece of plastic.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome back to Open Connection. In the 1744 Quebec census, only 3 men were recorded as gunsmiths. One possible reason why there are few gunsmiths was a long period of apprenticeship required, usually 5 years of learning alongside a master. Let us return to the archives as Peter demonstrates the proper sizing for a gun.
I don't know why, but North American manufacturers seem to provide guns for pygmies. The standard test for a gun in North America is to put it there, swing your finger up, and see if it hits that first knuckle on the trigger, which tells you the length of your forearm. I mean, it doesn't actually tell you anything else. If you hold your gun, a lot of people fire like that, a lot of people fire like that. And the important measurement is actually from this knuckle to the bridge of your nose. And on a light kicking gun, you would have approximately 1 inch to 1.25 inches. On a heavy kicking gun, you would want a little bit more. You would want about 2 inches, so that when the gun recoils, you don't hit yourself in the nose. There is cast off, cast on. I have customers who are right-handed, but their right eye doesn't work. So they have, in a factory gun, they're trying to shoot like that. So you bend the stock to fit them. I'm fairly broad in the chest, so I need the toe of the stock to be canted out slightly, so that when I put it up, the gun's pointed at the target. And a well-fitted gun should, if you look at a target, without any sight, you should be able to hit it quite reasonably within about 6 inches of the ball.
Appleby says the requests he gets from customers are wide-ranging, from custom building to various repairs, partly because guns last a long time, comfortably 100 years. This gun dates from the 1920s from the Savage factory and is the work of craftsmen. It has an unusual story.
This belongs to a local chap who, his father actually, I believe, wanted a vacuum cleaner. And part of the deal was the vacuum cleaner had to be bought with this gun. So he paid his not very much money back in the very early 70s or late 60s for this. His father then presented it to his son on his graduation from UBC, And his son eventually got a little bit tired of looking at it in its current condition, brought it along to show me and asked me what to do with it. It's worth approximately $4,000, which is 3,900 and some odd dollars profit, I suppose. However, he's no intention of selling it. It's a family heirloom now.
But times, they are a-changin'. This gun, made for a local hunting guide, has a stock of fiberglass and Kevlar. It's a large caliber, .458 Magnum, actually an elephant gun, but it's meant to be an insurance policy of sorts. Fitted with that reliable Mauser action, it ensures the guide of getting a shot off when it's needed.
The guys who buy these are dedicated hunters or the professional guide outfitter who is out 12 weeks of the year using his gun, and he hasn't got time to be worried about whether or not the gun will work. He expects it to work. He expects it always to be the same point of aim. And if it falls out of a canoe, he expects it to empty the barrel out and use it.
That gun costs about $950. Appleby predicts that a few years down the road, most guns will have that fiberglass Kevlar stock.
The woods that we use for gun stocks, all woods aren't suitable for gun stocks. Very, very few are. Walnut has always been the preferred wood for a fairly heavy gun, fairly heavy kicking gun. It resonates at the same frequency as steel, so it tends to crack very little. Consequently, for 600 years we've been cutting walnut trees. And this is the way I buy blanks. This is now $475 a piece of wood.
And that's before you've touched it.
Yeah, there's reckoned to be about another 6 to 8 years supply of walnut. It will be controlled by price. The price will go up. Now is probably the last 10 to 15 to 20 years of gunsmiths in any number working in wood. In 15 years, probably the vast majority of them will be fiberglass Kevlar workers.
And really, I mean, except for aesthetics, you're certainly losing nothing in getting the fiberglass Kevlar.
No, it's practically, it's considerably better material for gun stocks. You can drive your pickup truck across it, and if you don't bend the barrel, it works.
What about handguns and the demand for them in this neck of the woods?
There is not really a vast demand for handguns around here. There's not as large as I would have expected. Back in Ontario, there's a very, very large population of target shooters, handgun target shooters. We don't have quite as many out here.
I wonder a little bit about the reaction that you get here setting up a gun maker's shop or a gunsmith shop. I mean, guns are very controversial right now, handguns, and of course all the stuff in the news about automatic weapons. Has anyone come in here and wondered what you're doing or been concerned about the fact that you're here and able to make guns for people?
Not really. No, it's, I think I have very good friends who dislike firearms. My sister will not have a firearm in the house. That's her privilege, and I respect her opinion. It's my personal opinion is I tend to call those black plastic military lookalikes Mattel toys. They're, I believe the stocks for the M16 military guns were made by Mattel, the plastics toy manufacturer. I think they're junk. I think they're very expensive junk. But I also believe that it's your right to play with whatever toys you like. I think there certainly should be more severe penalties for misuse of firearms. I am really upset with the way it's treated in court. Guns don't jump off the racks and shoot anybody. There are some people I don't think should have firearms, but guns of themselves are actually mechanically they're heat engines. And if you say you're a heat engine engineer, who can get upset?
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
In 1976, in response to the coin shortage in Italy, the first calling card was introduced in 1977 and became extremely popular in Japan when they were introduced in 1982. In this final segment of Open Connection, we return to the archives as Jerry Load shares his story.
Almost all of it for calls the Loads did not make, but which were made with the use of their BC-Tel calling card number. First warning of something amiss came 6 weeks after Steph and Jerry got back from a California holiday. An early morning phone call from BC-Tel.
She said, have you been going crazy with your phone calling card, like lately? Your phone, your phone, calling friends and stuff, and said no. And
somebody was going crazy with the calling card, but the card wasn't missing, and Jerry could recall but once when anyone might have heard his number used.
I started doing a mental checklist. Someone did get it. How did they get it? And I remember the one place we stayed at in Los Angeles where I know the other guy was listening into the phone call for whatever reason.
The reason apparently involved phoning Maryland, Ottawa, the Netherlands, and dozens of times China, from California and from Arizona. Over $3,000 in fraud calls the loads won't have to pay for.
I guess their computer alerts them to that after so much money, it watches, and it knows how much your phone bill is every month. And if there's a big spike, if there's, all of a sudden they got $9,000 worth of phone calls, alarm bells go off and the computer alerts a human type, I guess. I don't know how else to explain it. And then they phone you and check with you, because if we'd been making the calls, they'd say fine, and the bill would just keep getting bigger, and then they'd expect us to pay it. But she let us know right away that, whatever you're responsible for is your responsibility to pay. And the rest of it, well, they have a fraud division, and they'll go after whoever, and not to worry about it.
Because this was theft of service, not negligence on the customer's part. BC-Tel Security makes it clear that you are responsible for card security, just like a bank or credit card. But out-and-out fraud will send the telephone company after the hotel where the offender worked. The hotel can chase their own employee for damages. BC-Tel has the technology to trace any long-distance call. Source, billing, or destination are all available from the computer for the shortest of phone calls. Never mind taking several minutes to trace. That was the old days. Security says the party responsible will be found, and that's fine with Jerry Lode.
He probably thinks that he stuck me with the bill. I mean, I don't think he understood what he was doing, and if that was the case, I hope they get him, because he was out to get me for X amount of money.
It's personal.
Yeah, it's a kind of it's like he just thought, well, I'm going to take this guy for a ride. He's going to get this bill and have to pay for it. Well, I gave the fraud division at BC-Tel all the information I had. I mean, I know what he looks like. I know where he works. I know what shift he's on.
Cord boards,
Nice hotel, Prince George.
the kind where the hotel operator is required, are disappearing in the face of new technology. Where you do still find them in North America and throughout much of Europe's system, using your calling card may not be wise. Too many people get access to your number. Find a direct dial payphone or call collect. The new switching systems are cutting down on the theft of telephone service. In 1982, almost 19% of $600 million in long-distance tolls were fraudulently billed. Increasingly, those amazing little computer chips are allowing the operators and the security staff to spot fraud immediately or track it once it's reported.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but the connection from his mind to his heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our immensity within. I'm Robert Pictou.